but they still call it a bridge because that's what the plans call for. If you understand that the misdirection of this process is what's accurately reflected in the complexity of all the drafts, all of a sudden things start to make sense. And, you know, as I said to Ms. Pasciuto and Mr. Christie earlier, I really hate being on the wrong side of this issue with them because I think they're formidable proponents for a lot of really good things. But in this particular case, despite the fact that they now talk, the ACTRA coalition now talks about how this is really meant to expand opportunities to hold events, and this is going to be great for the landowner, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you go back and you read the editorial that they wrote for the Viewpoint in May of 2008, they're absolutely against having non-ag events on ag land. They talked about how there go the oak trees and, you know, thousands of people will be tromping through the woodlands, et cetera, et cetera. So I totally respect that they have that point of view. And if they want to come up here and say, you know what, I don't want to have any weddings and events on ag land, I could be respectful of that. But to give this group that has publicly decried the original intention of the Board of Supervisors the opportunity to draft the ordinance that the Planning Commission is going to use, and they were tasked with implementing that intent, it's a little bit like giving the keys to the hen house to the fox. And they've done a great job. They have been really savvy and really clever, and, you know, I mean, I take my hat off because they've done a fabulous job. But it's not an honest ordinance. And because the way the dishonesty comes in that they know the legislative intent. So they know that they have to say they're trying to promote the flexibility and whatever for the process, for the events, for the ag landowner, because that's what the supervisor tasked them with. But they don't really want that because they don't want weddings and events on ag land. They want everybody to really, you know, raise tomatoes or something, which would be great. Believe me, ask any farmer, would you rather make $5,000 in one day raising tomatoes or hosting 150 people you don't know on your place? They would say tomatoes. Unfortunately, they're not making the money on tomatoes right now. So you have to understand, when you understand that what has happened here is that they have taken the legislative intent to promote the flexibility for the landowner and used it as a ruse to say, oh, but that harms ag tourism, then all of a sudden, all the things that don't make sense, like these weird categories, you know, you can do weddings 365 days a year for under 50 people. Well, of course, nobody gets married Monday through Thursday, but that's okay. Maybe you don't know that. Sounds reasonable. And now we have an event category where once every 10 years you can do a giant wedding. So maybe you can wait 10 years to pay for the maintenance on your barn, you know. Or if you're a nonprofit, and nonprofits were originally against this proposal, but their process has been streamlined. So I don't blame Mr. Christie for being in favor of this proposal. I would be in favor too if I was a nonprofit. But in this case, and Mr. Christie, I remember that you wrote an article once about the difference between the public interest and a special interest. And I really respected what you said. But in this case, your nonprofit is a special interest. And nobody has asked, where is the public interest in this? And the public interest has to take into account the economic impact of this ordinance. And if you look at those charts on the wall, we have 2 surveys that we've just completed that we hope to be able to share the data with you today that'll show that this ordinance will devastate the economy of this county. And it won't even stop the hordes of people because most of the weddings and events are under about 150 people. It's the nonprofits and the harvest festivals and the wine festivals, which will still be allowed, that are generally the thousands of people tromping through the cornfield. So thank you. Sorry for getting too intense, but I hope to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. So we're going to hear from you now, and it'll give you an opportunity to, as you see, we have a good tone set. They disagree, we're not disagreeable, so let's maintain that tone as much as we can and hear from you and try to get some clarifications. We'll start with a live question, shall we say, and then we'll alternate with questions that I'll read. So if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and Ermina will be happy to.
Hi, I'm Ron Holland, and I'd like to address Mr. Chudo. I'm assuming that you helped draft this. Is that correct?
Actually, I'd like to clarify that. Thank you for asking. The ordinance itself came out of the planning department.
Yes.
I served on the Ag Tourism Work Group that Ms. Nall alluded to in the development, where the group of 20 where nobody agreed group, where we met some 60 times over 18 months.
Didn't get there.
Didn't get there. And I have participated as an observer and as a person from the public who attends public hearings and made opinions known that were adopted by the Planning Commission. In some instances, not all, they didn't like every idea.
Correct.
And then the ordinance was drafted to include those. The only difference between the Ag Tourism Coalition ordinance and the Planning Department ordinance was intended to be organizational, only organizational. To the extent, and Jackie alluded to the fact that she has found some discrepancies, they're unintentional. There are entire areas where work has not been done and discussion has not been had. So for example, on enforcement, on the standards, the rules of operation, all of that work remains to be reviewed. And if there are discrepancies, they could be eliminated. It's not that there are two competing versions. There are 2 points of view, but I would point out that the Farm Bureau sat at every single meeting that the Ag Tourism Coalition sat at. So we're equally responsible for the results.
Okay, I would suggest to you in your presentation to this audience today that was a hell of a smokescreen. Because if you look at what is happening on ranches today, if they are having events, 50 people, that would include the caterers and the bride and groom and their family. Who else is able to come? Are there any other invitees? 50 people include simply the people that work the wedding. That I have experience with, that I know. So I think that's something you need to think about.
Well, I didn't draft the 50
well,
number.
It was in your presentation.
No,
and so I take it from there that you back that. Thank you.
We're gonna just in order to keep things moving, we're gonna try to even see if our panelists will limit their responses to a minute as well. And let me read a question. This is to Karen Nall from Stacy Jacob. Please explain the process to obtain a permit and fee structure to obtain an event today. Explain the process proposed. Is this truly simplified as proposed among some on the panel? So it's what does it take today, what's being proposed, and is this, in your estimation, a simplified process?
Okay, an easy answer to this one is the current ordinance requires a minor use permit. It takes anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. Fee is anywhere from $4,000 to $7,000, and it runs with the land. Nonprofits are exempt from that current process, from getting any kind of a land use permit. The complicated answer is the proposed ordinance has different levels of permitting. One has yet to be determined what level of permit you would need. So in some instances it will be easier. The newly created ag event would be that would be an easy process and over-the-counter type of a permit. Nonprofits would not need a permit. So that's it.
Okay, and just to clarify too, when you said the permit that runs with the land, that's one time for the owner of the land.
That's a proposed change. The proposed ordinance is that the event permits will be an annual permit. You'll have to get a permit every year.